Okay, fellas, I'm reading a report by Runoko Rashidi, Blacks' Presence in Early Japan. And he talked about how he was invited to Japan in '94 on a lecture tour. You know, Dr. Rashidi, he's a black historian and stuff like that. So down here, they uncovered the oldest Stone Age hut in Japan has been unearthed near Osaka. Archaeologists date the hut to about 22,000 years ago. These are white scientists, not black scientists, and says it resembles the dugouts of African Bushmen. According to Wazuo Hirose of Osaka Prefectural of Education's Cultural Division. Other homes, almost as old, have been found before, but this discovery is significant because the shape is cleaner, better preserved, and is similar to African dugouts. Now, as we know, 22,000 years ago, there were no other races but black people on the planet. That's when we were moving around the planet, evolving. And as you know, they found an underwater city in Japan, off the coast of Japan. These huge stone steps. It looks like, aliens, like giants walked up and down those steps. Like, wow. So, oops, wrong one. Let's see, where was I? That's some racist guys talking about it. And I put this on my forum. There it is. Okay, here we go. So, weird stuff out of history that people refuse to believe. I ran into a Japanese guy on another thread making rude comments. So I gave him a little bit of history. I gave him a quick history lesson. He's been silent ever since. But it seems indisputable that black people in Japan played an important role from the most remote phase of antiquity into, at least the 19th century. Now we know about Yasuki. He was the slave of a Jesuit priest. As you know, the Portuguese opened up Japan. And he was with the priest in the 1400s, I believe. He was freed from the Jesuit, kept in a cage for a while until some dignitaries saw him and freed him from the cage. He was apparently what they say, the modernists say, he was their first black samurai. They had so much respect for his strength. You know, he's a huge black dude. And there's stories of his marvels of strength and ability with the sword. You got to know real history. Even if you're Japanese, you got to know your real history. Meaningful indications of an African presence in ancient Japan have been unearthed from the most remote ages of Japanese past. To begin with, as a significant example, February 15th, 1986, report carried by the Associated Press chronicled the oldest Stone Age hut has been unearthed. Yeah, okay, I did that. We know about that. 1923, anthropologist Roland B. Nixon wrote that this earliest population of Japan were a main blend of Proto-Australoid and Proto-Negroid types. Now, they separated Australians. And now we know that Australians picked up the Neanderthal DNA and also the Denisovan DNA. These are other humanoid types on the planet. They were not human. Continuing, and thus similar in the ancient underlying stratum of the population, southward along the whole coast and throughout Indochina, and beyond to India itself. Dixon pointed out that in Japan, the ancient Negrito, and we know the Negritos are still living in the Philippine Islands. They've all been killed off. Now we have the Ainu in Japan, of which Jovina's boss, his mother, is descended of. He has an afro. I said an afro, okay? A Japanese with curly hair, an afro. And you know what the typical hair of Japanese is. The Japanese hate the Ainu. They almost killed him off. Ainus go into hiding and they straighten the hair out. They all but assimilated and they now look Japanese. Although many of them grow these big bushy, beards. By the time they hit the Japanese islands, they had changed. They had changed. They probably mated with the Neanderthals and the Denisovans as well. And by the time we got the islands, 22,000 or more longer ago, they had free run of those islands. Somehow somebody built that ancient city out, on the ocean out there. It must have been before the melting of the Ice Age, obviously, because the water levels rose after that. And it created those islands. Underneath those islands is land, right? So they must have had a really healthy lifestyle out there. Way flash forward in the future, the Chinese and the Koreans discovered the island and they became the Japanese populace. I don't know if Japanese know their history in this country, but that's where they're descended from, is the combination of Japanese and Korean mixture. Now, they like to believe they evolved by themselves. That's over in Japan because they had that racism going on. In his last major text, Civilization of Barbarism, an authentic anthropology published posthumously in English in 1991, the brilliant Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, 1923 to 86, pointed out that, and he's one that they would not allow him to test the DNA of the Egyptians. He actually traced their language down and proved that the language was an African language that was based on. In the first edition of the Nations, Negris et Culture, 1954, I not familiar with this word, posited the hypothesis that the yellow race must be the result of interbreeding with black and white in a cold climate, perhaps around the end of the Upper Paleolithic period. And that's where he's saying Japanese or Asians came from, because we were in China. We know that we were growing millet there in China. This idea was widely shared today by Japanese scholars and researchers. One Japanese scientist, Nobu Takano, MD, chief of dermatology at the Hamatsu Red Cross Hospital, has just developed this idea in Japanese that appeared in 1977, of which he was kind enough to give me a copy in 1979 when passing through Dakar. He visited my laboratory with a group of Japanese scientists. Takano maintains in substance that the first human being was black, then blacks gave birth to whites, and the interbreeding between the two gave rise to the yellow race. And remember, our Asian brothers, called the Mongoloid, they carried the Sans Bushman's face structure, the flatness of the face and the eyes. And also that got, because of the climate in Asia, the hooded eyes became popular, or the dominant. Those people survived long to breed on, pass that gene on. These three stages are, in fact, the title of his book in Japanese, as he explained to me. As to linguistics, in 1987, former Sinhalese President Leopold Sedar Senghor noted that the people who populate the island of Japan today are descendants from blacks. Let us not forget that the first population of Japan was black and gave Japanese their first language. And this is in Japanese. Let's see. Sakanya no Tumaramoru se e tai shogun of early Japan. Of the black people of early Japan, the most picturesque single figure was, this is the guy's name, Sakanoye no Tumaramoru, a warrior symbolized in Japanese history as a paragon of military virtues, and a man who has captured the attention of some of the most distinguished scholars of 20th century America. Perhaps the first such scholar to make note that Tumaramoru was Alexander Francis Chamberlain, 1865 to 1914. An anthropologist, Chamberlain was born in Kenninghall, Norfolk, England, and was brought to America as a child. In April 1911, the Journal of Race Development published an essay by Chamberlain entitled "The Contribution of the Negro to Human Civilization." While discussing the African presence in early Asia, Chamberlain stated an exceptionally frank and matter-of-fact manner. "As we cross the whole of Asia and find the Negro again, for when in far-off Japan the ancestors of the modern Japanese were making their way northward against the Ainu, the aborigines of that country, the leader of their armies was Sakanue Tumara, a famous general and a Negro." Dr. W. Du Bois, 1868-1963. I have to leave in 20 minutes to teach my class. Perhaps the greatest scholar in American history. In his book, The Negro, first published in 1915, placed Sakanue, that is to say, Saka, within a list of some of the most distinguished black rulers and warriors in antiquity. In 1922, Carter G. Woodson, 1875 to 1950, and Charles Harris Wesley, 1891, question mark. What, they don't know where he is? He can't still be alive. In a chapter called Africans in History with Others, in their book, The Negro in Our History, quoted Chamberlain, a white man, on, what did I say his name? Saka, verbatim. In the November 1940 issue of Negro History Bulletin, founded by Dr. Woodson, artist and illustrator Louis Jones, and they give her date, contributed a brief article entitled "The Black Japanese Motto," his name. In the article, Jones pointed out that the probable number of Negroes who reached the shores of Asia may be estimated somewhat in the wide area over which they were found on that continent. Historians tell us that at one time Negroes, that's us black people, were found in all the countries of southern Asia bordering the Indian Ocean, along the east coast as far as Japan. There are many interesting stories told by those who reached the distant land, which at that time they called Sipango. Now remember, or you guys aren't aware of this, but even in Thailand, in their history, they actually have a celebration every year honoring the Negroes that they killed off, tiny little Negro people. They're on the islands. They got into a war with them over a princess. They believe the princess was assaulted by one of them, and they went to war against them. So they killed off all the Negroes. There are even black tribes that were found in, of all places, Russia. So I'm going to finish it here. If you're on my forum, the article is there. You can finish it up. Learn something about your history, brothers. Okay? Learn some real truth. I'm not sure if I'm going to allow comments because I don't want the racist idiots to begin. They're quoting white scientists. If you have a problem with them, with that, see those guys. Okay? Don't come claim Afrocentrism here. They're quoting white people themselves. All right? These people got to get over themselves. Sometimes these racist dudes.